So if you've watched my previous videos, you probably know by now that I've made pretty strong arguments against drawing pretty girls only as the only ability that you're able to do as an artist. And of course, a lot of you were really understanding and very open to the idea of learning to draw things outside of just pretty girls. But there's still a handful of people who, when they receive this type of note or hear this type of advice, their automatic response is, okay, I'll just draw ugly things only then, as if it's like, well, you know, there are a lot of other things that you could be doing, right? But I feel like the thing that a lot of artists on the internet do not have access to information of, because a lot of artists who do share advice on the internet, while they are really great at what they do, they often aren't, you know, enough of a diverse pool about the types of options or availabilities that you can do as an artist outside of just being an artist on the internet. And this is coming from an artist that is also on the internet, but is also doing stuff outside of the internet as well. So hi, if you're new to my channel, my name is Michelle, and otherwise known as Mew Tripled, and I am the author and illustrator behind my first graphic novel, MEESH the Bad Demon. I am also a storyboard artist that has worked in the LA animation industry and assistant directed on shows on Netflix such as Oni, Thunder God's Tale, and storyboarded on the soon-to-be coming Wandla coming to Apple TV+. So I come from the world where the type of art I make has more narrative behind it. I make stories, I make comics, I storyboard for things with a script. So my type of perspective on art might be different from things that are just purely illustration or purely for the sake of creating an appealing image. So that's where a lot of my thoughts on this video topic is going to be coming from. But my response to people who just say that, you know, if you can't draw attractive people as your only thing, then you're just going to draw ugly people only. Well, you know, there is a whole other world out there of ways you can make really good art without having them only be conventionally attractive people, and that, my friends, is the art of appeal. So appeal is a thing that I actually feel like is not really discussed much in any art industry, but it is heavily talked about in animation because appeal is really making things interesting. It's creating intrigue in your art, which is a very hard concept to put into words, but I think when I show you some examples, you'll understand what I mean. So appeal is just when somebody looks at your art, they're somehow gravitated towards it because something about it is just really interesting. Something about it just creates a spark in their brain, and it doesn't always have to be because this person or the subject in the illustration is a conventionally attractive Instagram model. As an artist that's been on the internet since I was like, you know, 11 years old, and I've worked in the industry by now, and I've kind of had a range of different arts that I've been exposed to, I will say at this point in life, looking at really pretty, you know, conventionally attractive illustrations of girls personally to me is not really that interesting, but it can be, especially for younger, newer generations of people who are entering the art industries, and this is their entryway to being interested in art. And I understand that because that's how I got into art, is because I saw these very conventionally attractive girls in shoujo manga or just illustrations on DeviantArt or paintings by other painters and illustrators, so I get it. But I do think that a lot of artists, once they get their hot girl energy out of their system with their artwork, they're gonna eventually want to explore other things, and it would also be helpful for you just in general as an artist if you want to open up your options to other sorts of artistic paths, and if you feel like you want your art to be interesting and intriguing without being ugly, because that's apparently the only option that's out there if you can't draw attractive women. Here's why your art might be ugly, and here are ways to make it possibly more appealing. So one of the top reasons is because you do not have enough variety in your artwork. So a generic version of subjects exist in our brain, and those are usually based on what we are familiar with based on their general shape and design. But your lack of exposure and observation to the variations of this type of thing is very limited. For example, in our brains, we all know that chairs and tables are comprised of cubes and rectangular prisms mannerisms. However, that is usually just generically what is in our mind. You might have been exposed to different types of chairs and tables when you went to other cities, shops, countries, but you never really retain the designs of these other uniquely designed chairs and tables out there. The only way that you can really grasp a variety of the different types of things out there is by observing, documenting them in your sketchbook, and actually applying your observations to any of the future art that you make. This is why I highly encourage people to just keep a sketchbook of observations or them practicing new things that they have been exposed to, and keep adding more unique, various versions of generic subjects to your visual glossary. The next reason might be because you're not loosening up enough. Your art might be too stiff, which thus causes it to feel like it has no life. It's very easy for me to tell when a person has not taken enough life drawing or gesture drawing classes because they have a lack of variety in the poses or angles in their drawings. Usually their subjects are very straight on poses with no perspective, interesting camera angles, and that is usually because it is out of their comfort zone. And you know what I talk a lot about on this channel is getting out of your comfort zone, which is why I encourage you to try to take some life drawing classes. If you are not able to, there are a lot of resources online, like these examples listed in here, where you can draw humans and bodies beyond just frontal facing and making a peace sign at the camera. The worst culprits of all are those who copy and paste limbs thinking that it will help them complete the drawing faster, when ultimately this makes the drawing look even more stiff because your brain is able to quickly capture the fact that this is a copy and pasted limb. So if you're guilty of one of these, I highly suggest that you take a gesture drawing class and learn to draw the human body in an overall method instead of focusing on each anatomical part at a time. Once you are able to capture drawing the human body in different angles and poses, you'll be able to start experimenting and playing with things like shape language and the force of a line so that you can start stylizing your gestures in a way that they still evoke life while not having to be a photorealistic capture of what you observed. The next reason is because you're too quick to jump to stylization and you do not show your understanding of foundations in your art. To me, the strongest types of art have a good balance between stylization and fundamental understanding, because usually when you are too overly fixated on style, the moment that you have to draw something else, for whether if it's a project like a book, a student film, or a collection of images, you suddenly have a drawing that looks very off compared to the rest of your drawings that you're used to drawing. There are a lot of stylized projects out there, especially in games and animation, but usually the reason why we still buy into them as viewers and audiences is because there are elements that still ground them, such as their understanding of human anatomy, perspective, layout, color, and the way that they are able to push that type of design and break the rules is often because they know how to play with the limitations of reality. That's why if you're too quick to jump to stylization, your art might end up looking like a conglomeration of random lines, shapes, colors that don't really have an exact form to them yet, but your understanding of your observations from life is what's going to help you ground those stylistic choices so that when somebody looks at them, they make sense. This isn't to say that you should avoid stylizing your work, because it's more of a healthy balance about knowing what elements to stylize and what parts to ground with reality. And that is the part that will draw the connection between the viewer and the artwork, because they understood you drew a person in a background, but that stylistic touch is what gives it a different perspective to them. That then brings me to my next point of avoiding perspective, because let's be real, a lot of us really get drawn into drawing or creating art at first because we are fascinated by people, animals, and subjects. Usually some people do enjoy drawing backgrounds, layouts, which have a stronger requirement of perspective. However, that's usually not as much of the majority compared to humans and animals. However, this is not only applicable to backgrounds and layouts. Characters often require perspective because they are drawn in a multitude of angles, and the reason why some people's art may seem a little bit off is because they are attempting to draw their characters in certain angles, but their lack of understanding to do so might make the character seem a little bit lopsided. So while understanding perspective and layout may sometimes seem daunting because it's very technically driven, I would still recommend artists to learn about it, because even when you think you are drawing random characters floating in space at different angles and a background doesn't exist, the truth is that there really is a background or a layout that exists that determines the angle of the character you are drawing. The only difference is that you are choosing not to include the background even though it technically really is there. Nowadays, most artists default just draw characters straight up frontal facing, which is totally fine. However, there's not really going to be much that sets you apart from the other many artists out there who choose the same angles as you do. However, when you're able to incorporate perspective into your characters or drawings, you're able to evoke certain feelings that a simple character expression may not be able to. Why do you think that in storyboarding, different ways that shots are composed evoke certain emotions? Some extreme up shots may evoke certain feelings of power, and some extreme down shots may evoke feelings of weakness. There are also other varieties of shots that you can choose when you compose not just a storyboard, but any type of drawing to create a certain type of feeling beyond just a character's expression. And lastly, while I just made a lot of points about understanding your fundamentals and observing reality a bit more, there are times where trying too hard to capture exactly the same thing you're studying can lead to things like the uncanny valley, because your brain is too overly focused on capturing what is there. While it's important to learn how to draw things fundamentally, it is also important to remember that you're trying to capture the likeness or the essence of your subject in addition to what you are seeing. That's why I suggest using your observational skills as a tool to help push your art instead of an overarching rule that is determining the rest of your art's style. That's why at the end of the day, I find really good art to be a good balance of the two, where they understand their fundamentals, but they are able to easily disguise it in a style in a way that it is still believable to the viewer. So ultimately, I feel like appeal is based on the way that we choose to distort our everyday things around us in the form of art. The thing that connects your art to not just yourself, but the viewer is the connection of understanding what this thing is in reality, but your choice of stylization is what adds that new perspective. And if you haven't already, there's this video called Appeal, the magic tool to improve your characters by Flipped Normals, which is, I think, a really great video that talks about what makes certain types of artwork more interesting, intriguing than others. And I just think it's a great video that provides some tips on how to just give your drawing a little bit of that life boost, you know? Like if your drawing just feels a little bit lukewarm and not really that alive, here's a video that just provides really great tips on that. But yeah, other than that, again, if you're interested in getting feedback from me or having me review your work or your art career path and you're not sure what you want to do, definitely check out my Patreon email consultations, which you can also find in the links below, and I will see you all in the next video. So thanks for watching and peace out.